Muted.
Thank you all for joining us today for SWK's Sage 100 Year-end Processing webinar. Everyone is muted. If you have questions, please type them in the question section down on the right-hand side bottom, and we will answer them. What we're going to do is present 1099 year-end and W2 year-end processing. We'll start with the 1099 processing, take questions for that, and then go into the W2 processing and take questions at the end of the presentation. If you have questions that you think about later, you can always email us. Our contact information will be available at the end. So I'd like you all to welcome Ryan Whipple, who is going to be doing our presentation today.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming out today. So the first thing I want to take a look at is how you copy your company. When you're doing any year-end processing, usually it's a good idea to have a backup copy of your company first, and it's one of those things people don't necessarily do very often, so they may have forgotten how since the end of last year. So in your Sage 100, you would want to come to your Library Master module, then into your Company Maintenance, which is in the main folder in Library Master. And in Company Maintenance, you would put in the code for the company that you want to copy into. And that's the important part, is make sure it's the company you're copying into. So if it is an existing company, you can pull up that existing company that you may have created previously. Or if it's a new backup, then you would create the new company code. So you put in your company code and the name. Then over here on the right-hand side, there's a copy button. So when you click the copy button, it's going to give you a warning telling you that you shouldn't copy any individual modules that might be integrated together, basically telling you that, let's say you have inventory and sales order. If you copy just sales order but not inventory, you may end up with errors because those two modules are so closely related and integrated. So we'll tell that OK. It's going to tell us that we have to save the company because this is a new company. So we just tell it yes, and it will save. Then we come to this copy data window. So in here, you would pick the company that you are copying from. That's your source company. So I'm going to grab the Y17 company. Then it's going to present you with a list of all of the modules that you want to back up. So you could pick individual ones, or let's say you're just interested in backing up your accounts payable or your payroll, because that's what you're kind of working on the year-end processes for. So you can pick those. Otherwise, you can choose everything, and you can tell it to proceed. It's going to confirm one last time. Do you want to copy? We tell it yes. And then when it's finished, it takes you back to your company maintenance window, but now down below, it has all of the modules for that company. So that's the basics for copying a company. Now for your 1099 printing, that's done through accounts payable. And under the reports folder in AP, it's Form 1099, e-filing, and reporting. So to use the 1099 e-filing and reporting, it requires that you be on current maintenance with Sage. If you aren't on maintenance, then you won't be able to use the e-filing sections of Sage. And it also requires that you have the 1099 or the federal and state e-filing installed on each workstation that's going to be printing. And that can be done through the workstation setup functions. So when this comes up here at the top, you first choose your form, whether it's new or history. If you choose history, then that allows you to use any previous time where you may have started running your 1099s and saved that data, or maybe you saved your data from a previous year when you were doing your 1099s and you just need to come back in here and reprint them. So you can do that through a history. I tried to open it too quickly while it was still closing. So otherwise, we're going to be picking new, and I'm going to choose the miscellaneous form. You can choose your type of vendors, all types, individuals or businesses. You can define your minimum year-to-date payment, pick your 1099 calendar year, and you can verify all of your company information that will be used on the 1099 form. So once you have everything set there, you would go ahead and tell it to accept. Now, if you haven't used the federal e-filing in a while, it may pop up and tell you that it needs to update. Basically, even if you're only using the 1099 portion of e-filing, it still downloads and saves copies of all of the different forms across all different states that maybe relate to payroll. So it will frequently want you to download. So there will be a box that sometimes will pop up, and you would just want to click the automatic download, and then that would connect to the company that runs e-filing, Atrix, and you could download the latest forms for that. This is asking me if I want to use my work in progress because I had previously started generating some 1099s. I'm going to tell that no, so we can start from scratch. So this first box here is telling you that your 1099 company information is basically being saved as part of the e-filing. And that's going to use that information that we had set on that first screen. So you can just tell it OK past this message. And then it's going to walk you through a wizard process. And in the wizard, it's going to ask you several different companies to kind of determine what information needs to be printed on your 1099s. In my experience, for the vast majority of customers, the default answer on these questions is the most common one. So for most people, you can just, after reading the questions, most likely just tell it next through them. But it's important to look them over. So this first one is asking us if we want to do basically a test drive of the 1099 printing. So maybe after this webinar, maybe you want to go back and kind of try it out yourself. You could do a test drive with either all of your recipients or just the first 25. So you can be comfortable with the process and kind of get a feel for it before it's the end of the year or the beginning of January and you're trying to run these forms yourself. For our purposes, we're going to tell it no thanks and start processing the 1099s. So here it's going to show us our employee ID number. And then it's going to have our payer information. So again, another place where we can confirm our company information, our contact names, that kind of stuff. So maybe you want to put your information in there, email, whatever it might be. So once that's correct, you tell it next again. So in here, it's going to ask you if you are filing for your own company or if you are a third-party tax preparer. Almost everybody's going to be filing for their own company, so you can just tell that next. On this screen, it asks you about your tax account numbers for any states that you may have done business with this year. So in my test system here, it's California. So you have to enter in that tax account number before you can proceed to the next step. So you would select that state and hit edit. If you try to hit next past it, it's going to give you a warning saying that it's incorrect. And it basically is going to force you in here. For my purposes, I'm just going to put in a dummy number. Okay, so the next question here is for data verification. Do we have anybody that's elected to receive only an electronic copy? So I'm just going to tell that no. And then here, it's going to ask you about how you want to have your tax account numbers display for the 1099 recipients, whether you want to see things truncated, or if you don't have one, whether you want it to print with just zeros. Most people have it show the full account number. And then this one's asking you if you are filing for multiple companies combined together. So if you had multiple companies in Sage with the same EIN number, then this would allow you to combine multiple companies' data together and file them combined. So we're going to tell that no. So that was the last question for that first wizard process. So it's next going to bring up a window that will show us all of the information that would be printing on the 1099 form. And then it gives us an opportunity to go through and review that data, validate it, and make any changes if we need to. So there's two sections in this window. There's the left-hand side, which has the general information for the vendor, and the right-hand side, which has all the dollar amounts for the different boxes. So you can go through and verify. You can click on this bar in the middle to shift it to the left or right, depending on if you need to see more information from either side. And then you can also use the scroll bar down here at the bottom to get to any other fields. And basically what we do in this section is up here at the top, it runs through multiple steps. So in this first step, our goal is to verify the tax ID number for the vendors. And you'll see that that column has been highlighted in blue for us. So you would want to look those over, make sure that everything seems correct. And when you're confident with that information, then you would click the next button up here. So the system also does verification for you as well, basically showing you, doing extra checks for you automatically. So if you had a tax ID number for a vendor that was just formatted incorrectly, that was invalid, it would have popped up and warned you about that and forced you to correct that before you could move on. So as we tell it next, now it's checking the federal ID number. Now it's checking their names and addresses. So here we have a failure on one of these. So this one is failing because one of the vendors has a blank address line 1. So what we want to do is we can click the Go Back and Correct button. And it will take us and highlight that person, highlight their row in red, and take us straight to the cell that's incorrect. So if we look at this person, oh, it looks like their address line 1 is blank. Somebody may have accidentally typed it into address line 2. So for our purposes for printing 1099s, we can just correct this information here, and we can copy that information. And then paste it into address line 1, and then delete it here. But another good thing that you can do is actually, we've made the change here, so this is going to be fine for when we go to print these 1099s, but it also is good to change that information back in your vendor file. Because if you don't go and change it in your vendor file, you may have the same thing come up again next year. So to kind of save yourself that extra work and make the data as clean as possible, it's usually good to go back and change it in both places. So if we come back, clicked on the wrong thing there. If we pull up vendor maintenance, and then we pull up that vendor, we can then go and move that address out of line 2 and up into line 1 so that that won't happen to us next year or if we're restarting the process later. Okay, so then we can tell it next. So now it's verifying the income boxes. So now it's highlighting all of the boxes over here, so we might click and drag so we can see more of that information. Now, I did it very simple in our situation here where everybody was just using box 7, but it might be a situation where your company has much more complicated 1099 needs. So if you find, same thing as what we saw with the address, if you find that there's something incorrect, you can click on any of these fields and directly make changes to those amounts here, and this is what will print on your 1099s. Otherwise, you can also come back to your vendor, go to the additional tab, and then you have your 1099 history button next to all of their like tax ID number in case that was incorrect. And you can come here and fix any information. And if you're not quite sure whether you have the correct information here, Sage has a report that will help you with that. So under your reports section in Accounts Payable, you have your payment history report. When you launch this report, you can change the sort report by, make it by vendor number, choose your period range that you want, so the whole year that you're reporting for, and then you can check the box to print 1099 vendors only and hit preview. So this report will then group for you by your vendor, will list for you all of the different checks that you have cut to them, and then give you a total by vendor and a total for the entire company. So you can compare that to the information that you're seeing just in your vendor. So like this for this vendor, 01 Anders, they are both $12.50. Or if you come back to your 1099, you can also see the same numbers here and verify them here. And we see we have a total for the company in case you have quite a few vendors. It's $94.50, and that's the same total that we're seeing here on the report. Now, obviously, you have to weigh that against the type of business you're doing with your vendors, whether all of the payments that you are making to them are applicable to 1099s, or if sometimes only some of the payments you're making to them. So you can't just blanket use these amounts. You have to think about the different vendors and what your relationship is with them. So now that we have verified that, we're going to close that. So now we will tell it next. Next thing it's having us verify is the filing state. And now it's verifying the amount of the state income that's being withheld. So now that it's finished verifying all of that information, it brings up this window. Basically, this is kind of an advertisement. Basically, Sage has partnered with this company, Atrix, and they're the ones who have built this federal and state e-filing platform that's used for the 1099s and for W2s. So they allow you to use it basically for free and to print the forms onto paper for free. But they also offer a service where you can pay them and they will actually print all the forms for you and email them out or mail them out for you to all of your vendors. And it really just, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense. More and more, my customers are choosing to go this route. It basically takes a lot of the headache out of running 1099s or W2s and just makes the whole process a lot quicker. So this is basically an advertisement for that, where it's $2 per recipient or $24.95 minimum. So usually, by the time you factor in the cost of the forms and how much time you're going to spend, it's very comparable there. So after we click next past this, it brings us up to this window where we can choose what way that you want to print them. So you can do the complete e-filing, and it basically gives you an estimate for what that's going to cost. Or you can come down to other options, and this is where you can choose the free options, where basically you are printing them. And they are free, as in you will not have to pay Atrix. There is still special paper that you need to print your forms onto, so you do still have that expense. And that's one use that I have a lot with clients, is it's getting to be the end of your time period for submitting these, and people still haven't necessarily ordered the forms, or they ordered forms and got the wrong ones. So you have to be very careful with that. So for demo purposes, I'm going to do the complete e-filing. And then it also gives you an option of whether you'd like to buy a PDF archive. Basically, they give you a CD with a PDF that has all of your 1099s on it, so that you can reprint them easily onto plain paper if you need to. At this point, I'm going to tell it no, thank you. Here it's going to show me all the different states that we have selected in our data. I'm going to tell that next as well. That's in case we didn't necessarily want to print all of the states. And then here, it gives you a chance to review the option that you have chosen for your printing. So it's just basically a chance for you to, in case you checked the wrong box or something like that, to see what you're printing. So we'll tell that next. And it has an option there where you can hit print. Basically, it just prints that list and shows you what same things it was showing on. So most of the time I don't bother with that. So here it is popping up the first form that it would be printing. So that's the 1096 form for California. So you can then hit print copy. On this window here, it allows you to choose the printer that you're going to be printing to. Lets you set different printer options, like what tray it's going to be pulling from. And then you also have page align down here. So even if you're able to print it onto regular plain paper, there are still requirements from the government as to where that shows up on the page, and different printers may pull the paper slightly different and end up shifting things to the left or right or up or down. So they have a page alignment function in here that allows you to print some test pages to make sure that your printer is set up correctly so that you don't end up having any forms rejected. basically you would come in here and you can tell it to print an alignment form. Basically prints out a sample form from your printer, and then you can measure some marks that it prints on the form, so that these marks are supposed to be, let's say, an inch from the left and an inch from the top. If they aren't in that position, then you can come in here and drag these bars to shift them to the left or right or up or down, and then print another test page until you get it correct, basically. So here, then you tell it OK to print. I'm going to just print mine to PDF. So then you have your copy there, basically a copy just for you. So once you're done with that form, then you tell it next. Then it takes you to another form. So here is a payer copy, in case you want to keep a copy for yourself. So I'm going to print copies of each of these forms out to PDF. I don't know why it's getting stuck like this, so I think we're going to cancel it. Or we'll crash the whole thing. So I'm just going to click next past these forms. And it tells you up here at the very top what the form is. So that's the payer copy. Okay, so because we have chosen to do the complete filing, it's going to bring us to this screen once you are finished printing those forms and printing your copies. Basically, this is a login set up with Atrix. You use the same login from year to year. If you've forgotten your login, you can contact them and they will help you get logged back in again. But basically, you would come in here, set up a username and password, and then it would walk you through a process where you can give them a credit card and finalize paying for that complete copy. But I wanted to show you guys this because a lot of people may not have used that before and didn't know what it would then do for you. Then it's going to ask you why we didn't complete the process. I'm just going to tell it that we were testing the process. Okay, it brings us back here. And let's say you have a very large number of vendors, and maybe you don't have time to get through validating all of their information in one sitting. That's where you can come up to the File menu here, and you can tell it Save. And basically you can save the data that you have here on this screen, any changes that you may have made, and then you can come back and continue that work in the future. So I'm going to tell that one save. And after it's done saving, I'm going to exit. And every time you exit or finish 1099 printing, it's going to ask you this question. Do you want to increment your default 1099 calendar year? Basically, this would just automatically increment the default year to, let's say, now 2018. And it just means that when you're in vendor maintenance and you click on that 1099 history button, it's going to default to showing you your data from the next year, 2018. It does not mean that it's not going to save the data correctly if you forget to do this before 2018. When you make a payment in Sage, it's going to see that date that's on the check, see that that's in 2018, and it will then save that information to 2018, whether you have incremented this year or not. So most of the time, I don't do this until I know that I'm all done with my 1099s and that I'm not going to need to come back in and make more changes or reprints. So I'm going to tell that no for right now. If you do need to come in and change it in the future, it's under your setup folder in accounts payable options, and it's just your default 1099 calendar year right here. So let's look at the situation where we didn't finish our 1099s. We got partway through verifying people. Now we want to come back and work on it more. You come to your Form 1099 e-filing. This time you tell it history. Pick your form. And when you tell it accept, it's basically going to bring up a list of the drafts that you have saved. So it has this saved session, saved draft that we were working on. So you could click on that one and you could tell it to edit, and then it would take you back in to working on your process. Okay, so that basically takes care of everything for 1099 printing. Go ahead and type in any questions that you have. I'm going to go and read some that have been typed up already, and then I will go through and answer those questions. So we have one question about the updating the tax forms. So when you go to launch your 1099 printing, it may prompt you to update. It depends on when the last time you went in to 1099 printing or W2 printing, whatever it may be, when the last time you did that. Basically, each time it looks at the versions of your forms that you've created, and it looks to see, connects to the Atrix server online, checks to see what their latest version is, and if there have been changes to forms, it will then prompt you to download and update your forms. And the point I was trying to make is, because even though we're looking at 1099s, this applies to all of the payroll forms across all the different states. Because there are so many different forms, it's quite common for there to have been some change somewhere, even if it's a state that necessarily doesn't apply to you, or maybe you don't even use payroll. So because there are so many of those, if you haven't been in it in a few months, or even a year since last year when you did 1099s, it's probably going to prompt you for an update to download. Now, if you're just connecting back in a couple of days later, it may not prompt you for an update. But as you get closer and closer to year end, they are making more of those changes, so you will see that. And currently the 2017 forms aren't even out. We were actually using the 2016 forms from last year. Let me look for the next question. So I have a request to review how we got back into this process. So when you go and launch your 1099 e-filing, you tell it history, pick your form, set your limits just like you normally would. But now when you hit accept, because you've told it history, it's going to bring up a list that shows you any of those processes that you have started and saved as drafts earlier. You can select them and hit edit, and then you will basically pick back up where you left off. Then you can continue reviewing your vendors, and then when you're done, save your changes again, come back in again later, whatever you might need to. So we have a question about what forms. So if you are going to print the forms yourself and not use their complete bundle, the place you'll want to come is sagechecks.com. When you come to this main website, they have a section here in the middle for tax forms. You'd pick your 1099s. This window will pop up where it asks you to select your software. So you'd pick Sage 100, and then you'd pick your version. So 2015, which is the e-filing that we've been looking at. And then you tell it to continue. So then it shows you all of these different form packages. So there are some that they will include the red copy that you'll be printing for the federal government. And then for the other copies that you're sending to the states or for the vendors, it has these 4-part perforated sheets that are plain. And those are the forms that you do have to use for printing your 1099s. And as you go to print those, when we were in that section where we were printing the forms, when you hit the print button, a message will pop up telling you which type of form to insert into your printer. So it prompts you and tells you. So it may be one where you want to look at these forms, find the ones that best match your needs, and then maybe test out the printing process. And they have the prices here. So especially if you have small quantities, this is where it's usually cheaper to pay and have Atrix do it for you, because if there's only 25, it's already over the price to have Atrix do it all for you. So yeah, I think you'd have to have quite large quantities before it starts to make sense, or where you'd save money. We have another question about connecting for the updates. So yes, every time you launch Efiling, it connects to Atrix's servers to determine if there are updated forms. So your user has to have enough rights, and the connections for your IT has to be set up so that that connection is able to be made. Some people, that just means that they can, some people it means that they can just run Sage as an administrator, and that will give them enough rights. Other people I've seen, they actually have to have their IT person come and log in on their workstation. It all depends on how much security has been set up on your machine.
Okay, next question is, can you export the form information into Excel?
Let me take a look. I know I've had that question before. I don't think that it's possible, but we'll give it a try. So we were able to select one and copy it, but I don't think we have the ability. Oh, maybe we do. Yeah, we don't have the ability to copy more than one row at a time. So for most people, it's not a viable way to get the information.
Okay, next question. When will 2017 forms be available?
They usually come out about the third week of December, so it should be in the next week or so usually. But there are usually updates to the forms, sometimes as frequently as weekly, so make sure that you always have that, run that update if it does pop up and prompt you for that.
And when available, will the 2017 1099 miscellaneous print one or more to a page?
So it will print 4 to a page. It defaults, well, the federal red copy that we were seeing, that prints 2 per page. But all of these other ones that you'll see in the background there, they use 4 per page. And yeah, it's a perforated sheet.
And the next question is, can you please send a copy of the recorded webinar after this? Yes, everyone who has attended will receive a link next week that you can download the recording and any documents that are supplied with the webinar. When will Sage be ready to process the 2017 1099s and W2s?
It's basically as soon as the forms come out. There's also usually an IRD, basically a patch for Sage that comes out that, you know, might make some changes to this e-filing software. That usually comes out the third week as well. So that needs to be installed in your system before you run your 1099s and W2s. But yeah, I do have some people that end up running them before the end of the year because, you know, they have more payrolls to process right at the beginning of January, or they just want to get it done. So I have occasionally had people that are running it at the end of December.
Okay, next question. When I go to AP reports and then Form 1099 e-filing and reporting, I get a message that says, the e-filing and reporting client needs to be installed. Do you want to proceed? Is this utility not included on my version, or do I just need to update? We're on version 2016.
So that is something that gets installed or would need to be installed on your workstation. So it's not something that's automatic. So it just means that you don't have it installed on your machine. You can tell that yes, and it will attempt to install it for you. If it doesn't work, it just means that you may not have enough rights, or you may need to launch the installation process yourself. In your Sage folder on your server, in the Mass 90 folder, there's a WK setup. You have an autorun.exe. You would want to right click and run that as administrator. And in here it has install federal and state e-filing and reporting. So that, if it doesn't work automatically, then you can try installing it that way. If it still has trouble installing, then you'll need to have your IT sign in, and with their, network administrator users, and that should take care of it and allow you to get the installation done. The installation is very simple. Basically, it's just clicking that you accept the terms and telling it next several times. So there's really nothing to that portion of it.
All right, and that's the last of our questions.
Okay. The only other thing I would point out for you, in case any of you are going to be dropping off, if you have more questions about anything year-end related, Sage has a website set up for you, and we'll have this link in the emails that go out later, but it's sagecity.na.sage.com/p/year-end. So this is basically their year-end center. You can pick what software. So for us, it's Sage 100. And then it has a bunch of resources for you about your year-end processing, different forums where people are discussing things, support articles, software updates. That's where you can download the IRD. Lots of information for you. So if you need any more information than what we may have covered here, you'll definitely be finding it out here on Sage's website. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move on to W2 processing. So many of the same things will apply to our payroll processing. So in payroll, it's under period end, and it's federal e-filing and reporting. Now it's a little different than AP because there are so many more forms that apply to payroll, where AP is really just the 1099 form. So from here, you can pick either federal or state. You can choose your states, and depending on what the state is, there are different forms that apply to just that state. So you may not be using these, but it's really a great resource for basically generating these forms. A lot of these forms can be printed just to regular plain paper, and can, really save you a lot of time when you're trying to fill those out. So first thing you want to do is come in here and select the form that you want. So I'm the 2016 W2 form. Like I said, the 2017 one doesn't exist yet. But over here on the left, you can then choose the year that you are printing for. So it's going to default to what you have as your current year. Has all of our company information down here. has your W2 and box 14 selections. Once you have all of this information correct, then you would just hit accept. So again, it's telling us that our company information is going to be saved in the e-filing side, and that's what it's going to be using. It gives us the option for basically running through a test print for our W-2s, where we can pick just 25 or all of the people. We're going to tell it no thanks and start processing. Gives us a chance to verify our company federal ID number. We have our company information. So if any of that is incorrect or you want to fill out a contact name, that type of stuff, you can do that here. Asking if you are filing for your own company or if you're a third party. We're going to pick filing for my company. So here it has all of the different states and the tax ID numbers that you need for those states and the different programs at those states. Now this information, these tax ID numbers, are actually stored in your tax table maintenance. So in the payroll module under setup, pick tax table maintenance. So you can type in Fed, and that's where you have your federal ID number. Or you can put in your state code, and that's where you have that state's company ID, or tax ID number. So you can just fill those in as you need them each time you go to run reports, or if you put them under the tax table maintenance, then they will default and it will just save you a little bit of time next time. So it asks if you have any employees that are exempt from Medicare or Social Security taxes. Do you want to use a control number on your W-2s? Do you have any employees that elected to receive W-2s form electronically only? So we'll just leave all of those as no. Has some W-3 information, so you could put in a control number if you needed to. You can choose what kind of payer you are. Most people are 941, but I do have some clients that might be agriculture or one of these others. You can set your kind of employer. You can put in information about your third-party sick pay, information for your box D and H on the forms, and you can mark if your business was terminated this year. Asking again if you have multiple companies using the same employee ID number. We're telling it no. Okay, so then similar to, again, to the 1099s, it pops up a window here that allows you to verify all of the employees' general information on the left-hand side and the different wage information on your right-hand side. Up at the top, we can hit the next button to go through and verify the employee information. So here it has failed on some of the employee information checks. We have a person with a Social Security number that begins with a 9. None of the Social Security numbers can start with 9s, and we have a few employees that have a blank address line 1. So if it was an exceptionally large list, you might want to print a list. So we have that option down here. Otherwise, you can go back and correct, and basically it's highlighted each of the rows that have an issue and highlighted those individual cells as well. Now, just for the demo purposes here, I'm just going to use the same address here for everybody. Obviously, in a real situation, you would go back and correct that information under the employee and determine what their correct address should be. Okay, so once we hit next again, it basically checks that same information again to make sure you fixed the issues, and then it moves on to the next thing. So now it's having you verify your different W-2 information, whether statutory employee, retirement plan, and the third-party sick pay. Having you review their wages and their Social Security tips. Verifying their state wages. And again, it gives you an advertisement for the complete W-2 e-filing service. So we can go through and, again, it's $2 per employee. So this time I'm not going to pick the complete service. I'm going to choose the other options. Now you could pick individually to have them just file the federal or the state W-2 forms for you. Otherwise, you can leave those ones unchecked and you can choose to just print. So once again, it's going to ask you if you want or highlight some of the benefits of doing the complete package. It has links for you if you'd like to learn more. When you click on those, it brings up a help system that kind of gives you more information about all of those. Otherwise, we'll just tell it next and move past that. We'll leave that on for Wisconsin, tell it next. So it's asking here if we want to have divider sheets in between the different forms. It's just a personal preference, basically, whether you want that separator to make it easier to see where one form starts and another one does. So we're just going to tell it no. It's going to tell us what forms we're going to be printing, and then we can tell it next to start printing those forms. So now it is showing us the data that would be printed. So it's going to start with the Wisconsin W-2. If it was multiple pages, you could use these arrows here to arrow between the pages in case you wanted to look over any of the information here, make sure that it looked correct. When you hit print final, this is where it's going to give you that pop-up message telling you what type of form to be inserting. So it wants you to put in a 4-part perforated W-2 paper. And again, that's where we saw here, there's a bundle for 25 forms, $1.40 each, that has that 4-part perforated along with envelopes to mail them out in. And you have the ability to print these multiple times in case you wanted a PDF copy along with printing them to the paper. So I do have some people that have chosen to do that before. So when that finishes, then you can tell it next step. So then it's the employee W-2 forms. So now we have multiple pages you can scroll through and look at if you want. Again, it tells you to put in the 4-part perforated. Then it brings up the form for you. The employer W-2, same thing. I'm going to skip past some of these. We don't need to print them all. So your federal form is a little different. It's 2-part. So it wants a 2-part perforated paper. Your W-3 form. So this one didn't prompt us for anything to insert any special paper. So this one can be printed on regular plain paper. And then we have the notice for the employees. That can also be printed on plain paper. Okay, so once you have finished printing your forms, you have a W-2 history section. Shows you all the different forms that you've printed. You can come back here in the future if you need to and tell it that you want to reprint any of those or e-file incomplete ones or make corrections or completely start all over. Or we can just tell it to close. Okay, and that basically takes you back to Sage for your W-2 stuff. So that's basically the process for printing your W-2s. So we'll go through some questions and take a look at anything in greater detail if anybody had some more questions.
Okay, we have a couple questions here. First one, when correcting employee address on the first page, can you go back to the employee maintenance to correct and then re-import the data?
Yes, you can do that. So you could, open up employee maintenance and make those changes there, but then you have to completely close out of that W-2 printing section. Tell it no that you don't want to save any of that information and basically start the process over, which is perfectly fine to do it that way. You would then want to probably make sure that you've made all of the corrections first, or as many as you can, if you're going to go that route, so that you're not going back and forth over and over.
Okay, next question. Is there a limit to the number of employees I can process W-2s for?
No, there's not a limit. I have some customers that have, 4,000 or 5,000 employees, and they're running their W-2s through Sage. And I have, some people that have like 4 or 5 employees. So no, it can handle any number.
And our last question, even though we didn't review it today, this is about 1095 processing. Last year, IT was able to roll ACA 1095 data over to prevent so much data entry. Is this option available in 2017?
Do you mean roll it over? They took the same information from the previous year and just brought it into 2017?
Yes.
I haven't had that request before. I don't know if I think that it is possible to import, with Visual Integrator to import those values in for the employees. I personally haven't had a client request it, and I haven't done it, but I'm pretty sure I've heard about doing that. So that is most likely what your IT has done for you. So yeah, they should be able to do that again if so.
All right, and that seems to be the last of our questions. Oh, wait a second, one more. Are there instructions available from Sage?
I don't think there's instructions for importing that stuff. The same VI job that they used last year should still be valid. I would imagine that it imported from like a CSV list or something like that. So it should just be creating a new source file for importing it and then using the same VI job that they used last year.
Okay, and the last question is, will you be offering a 1095 processing webinar?
I don't believe that we are. The process is basically the same, and the process for printing all of these forms are pretty repetitive. Once you're comfortable doing one of them, like your 941 form, you can pick here. They pretty much all of them have a wizard where they ask you a few general questions. Some of them take you into a section like we saw with the 1099s and W2s where you can change information. Many of the forms just show you the form on the screen here and then give you the opportunity to correct or fill in any values that are red. Like here where it wants you to put in the total deposits that you've made. It allows you to select any of these fields that are blue and change the amounts in case there's, some kind of mix up and something's wrong. So that's basically the process for running any of these forms that you see in the e-filing section.
And if you want to schedule a time with us, we can go over the 1095 processing with you one-on-one to answer any questions that you have. All right, that's the last of the questions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out, and let us know if you have any questions or if there's any additional information that you need after we send out that email with the links.
Thank you all for joining.
We'll also be including a document that Sage created last year that walks through the whole W2 printing process with the federal e-filing in great detail. It's 50 or more pages, includes screenshots of step-by-step everything. So that's a really good resource when you're working through it yourself. So you'll have that to refer back to as well.
So thank you all and have a happy holiday.